you can join us. My name is Nicole Ostrom, and I'm the VP of Programs for your Wylie High School PTSA. And we have been given the honor of sponsoring this program tonight, along with your student support advocates from Wylie High School, Dr. Miller and Mrs. Chapman. And so they're joining us on here tonight also. You may open up your chat, and they will be kind of watching the chat throughout this tonight to answer any questions you have and give you some guidance. Feel free to reach out to them on there. We're going to ask that during the presentation you do stay on mute. It's up to you whether or not you want your camera on, but please stay muted so you can hear our speakers. And let's see. I think that was everything. So first off, we're going to get going with Dr. Miller. You want to go ahead and get us started, and you can tell them a little about your student advocate program?
Yes, thank you for introducing me. And our other student support advocate, Mrs. Lori Chapman, is going to join us. She's trying to connect right now, so hopefully you'll see her on here. But we're the two student support advocates at Wylie High School. I'm handling students in the beginning of the alphabet from A to L, and she's meeting with students from in the alphabet M to Z. And so we're just on campus to support students that are having any kind of personal or emotional issues, things that they want to talk about. We're the people on campus that talk more about feelings, where your academic counselors will handle more about your classes. So we're there at Wylie High School and accept referrals from parents. So parents can always reach out to us. We're in the counseling office, and students can come by and share their concerns about their friends, or if they just want to talk themselves. So if anything from this presentation makes you think that you should reach out to one of us for more help, please do. Please contact us in the counseling office.
All right, thank you so much. If you're just joining us, we're going to get started on our presentation. If you can make sure you are all muted so that you can hear the speaker. All right, and so let me introduce our speaker to you tonight. It's Jennifer Huynh, is the Program Director of Teens Can Survive with the Suicide and Crisis Center of North Texas. So thank you for coming and presenting to us tonight, Jennifer. We're going to let you go ahead and take it over.
Great, thank you. And you actually said our whole title of organization correctly. Sometimes it gets mixed up. So I'm like, actually it's a suicide and crisis. It's really long, so we just call it SCC. But well, it's nice to meet y'all in a very strange way, right? We're doing it through Zoom. And so I am recording it right now, so hopefully they'll be able to share for those who want to see it kind of on their own time, because this is a very important topic that I feel like it's important to talk about, especially since you guys are all either working with teens or parents of teenagers. So basically today's presentation is going to be focused on like suicide and mental health and what to look for specifically in teens or adolescents in general. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. 1 second. Okay. And as we go through this, if you guys feel like you have any questions, if you could jot it down, that'd be really great. And I'll be able to answer whatever questions that y'all may have. And maybe something that we could kind of think about before is, let's say if you're worried about someone, let's say another teenager or even someone else, like an adult in your life, this can all be applied to when it comes to what the warning signs of suicide are and what you could do to assist. So,
Jennifer, excuse me, before you get started, could you mute everybody from your end?
Yes, let me see if I can. I'm wondering, do you know how to do that?
You can click on the individual users, and if you right click, it'll give you the option to mute.
I see, okay. All right, thank you. All right, I'm about to mute all. Okay. All right. Okay, so as I was speaking about earlier, to kind of think about something you may be worried about, and if you're still concerned about them afterwards, then there's a lot of resources at Wylie ISD, and so reach out to them, and they are on here if you guys feel like you have any other questions too. So today, when we're talking about suicide and mental health, it may look a little different in teenagers. So what I usually like to do is talk about the teen brain and kind of get an understanding of what to expect, especially in teenagers, and how that could sometimes lead into, let's say, suicide or other mental health concerns as well. Okay, so one of the things I like to talk about is what are maybe some common teen issues. And as we're kind of looking through this list, it's not extensive because there may be a lot more, but these are some common ones that we hear about or see, such as, depression, anxiety, self-esteem, body issues, eating disorders, bullying, drug and alcohol, suicidal thoughts, self-injury, and things like that. So these are all common ones, but obviously every teen is going through their own individual struggles. And so as we look at how there has been a rise in just anxiety and depression in general, and especially during this times of COVID and how it has especially been very isolating. So we're noticing an increase in just anxiety and depression for kiddos, because, you go from being able to do our usual routine and being able to do something like going back to school and seeing our peers and students, and now we have to be very flexible and make sure that everybody is safe. And so we notice a rise in anxiety and depression in general because of that. And then we're noticing that there is more, let's say, there's a drop in alcohol use, but marijuana use has kind of largely either stayed steady pretty high or has been, let's say, used more. And I think that we also have to talk about bullying and cyberbullying and how that is affecting kiddos, not in the same sense it did before, but more of, things that we are seeing online, like cyberbullying, and how our life is very much consumed with social media, and how sometimes with this consumption of the internet comes with, the possibility of cyberbullying, or also, negativity, especially from what they call like internet trolls. So as we're looking at the teen brain, you guys feel like this is pretty accurate, right? There's a part of this focus on love, maybe there's some rebellion, and this tiny little part is memory for chores and homework. So, as we look at this, we are thinking this is what the teen brain is like what is their focus, what is their priority? And joking aside, there are some actual research, and it talks about how really the teen brain is still trying to develop. And so part of what is developing helps us in understanding why that we may do the things that we do. And adolescents, their brain is completely developed after the age of 25. And so all the way up from the age of 25, their brain is still trying to develop. And part of what is trying to develop is, in this picture, think of it as it's going from, the way that our brain develops is it goes from the bottom and the back all the way up to here. So what we are already naturally have is that, the natural survival, fight, flight, or freeze. And then after that, as we start to develop and get older, we start to learn, have our emotional brain develop more. And so this part is really responsible in anxiety, hormones, responding to stress, dealing with emotions. So that's why sometimes as teenagers, we may feel like we could be happy, sad, and angry all within a few minutes. It's because they basically think of the emotional brain as kind of firing so much that it can feel very overwhelming and confusing. And so parents being able to understand that they also sometimes do not really know why they feel the way that they do. So sometimes we may hear the response like, oh, I don't know why I feel like this. And we may very well not know why. It's just sometimes that's how our brain is working at that time. And then also moving up into the the thinking brain, this is the part where it's about problem solving, being aware, and self-regulation. And so that's why this is kind of one of the, this is one of the last parts to really fully develop. And that's why sometimes we may feel like kiddos may act on impulse or may not be able to, regulate as quickly as we'd like, or even be able to figure out solutions to issues. And so as a parent, it's very much being able to kind of be there while they are developing as individuals. And so since their brain is under construction, there may be the limbic and the prefrontal cortex is the one that's developing, which is this part right here, these two. And so because of that, with their limbic system, which is the emotional part of the brain, it drives emotions and it goes into overdrive in the teen years, which is why I was saying that sometimes those emotions can kind of go a little bit, be overwhelming. And then with the prefrontal, it helps in impulse control and judgment. And this time it doesn't reach maturity until our mid-20s. And which is why we sometimes make questionable decisions in college. And we know that we all have, right, at some point. And so there is a understanding in that their brain is trying to develop. And as adults, we have a key part in really being able to help in guiding teenagers during this very overwhelming time in their life. I don't know if y'all remember what it was like to be a teenager, or if y'all were like me and try to forget what that was like, but it was very, interesting and different for each person. And so, especially with what is going on now in the world and what teens are maybe going through now is different from what I went through as a teenager. And so part of it is that it becomes somewhat overwhelming even for parents, because we just don't know everything that the kids are going through either. And so we're going to talk about how we kind of get to that point and really understanding your child's world a little bit, which could help us in really being able to help and guide them in general. So sometimes the reason why teens may use, I need to change this, but not self-destructive, but maybe use unhelpful coping to deal with stuff is, maybe to handle difficult emotions or feelings, maybe feelings of boredom. They may be isolating, there's feelings of loneliness, or they may use, unhelpful behaviors to counteract stress or even social anxiety. And so there's usually a reason why they may act in a certain way. And so one of the big things that I like to talk about the teen myths, and how we thought these myths were true at one point, right? Where we think, oh, raging hormones cause the teens to go mad and lose their minds. And what is happening is that their brain is, again, still developing. And so their hormones are kind of all over a little bit. And so, again, it can be overwhelming. And so being able to be a little bit more patient and what that may look like is what we'll talk about at the end of the presentation. And then the other myth is that, teenagers' time is a time of immaturity and they just need to grow up. So their brain is not fully mature yet. However, as a teen years, whatever it is that they learn right now will help in preparing them for whenever the brain is developed and whenever they go into adulthood. And so part of it is seeing that, there is some immaturity, and how sometimes we can also learn about some of the immaturity that teens may have and being able to kind of enjoy life. And so we'll talk about that too a little bit after this, and how there are some things that we can really learn from our teenagers, and how sometimes as adults we start to lose some of the pros of being a teen. And the other myth is growing up means that they move from dependence to independence from adults. What we're actually looking for is interdependence, meaning that they are just like anyone else. As adults, we also need support as well. And so being able to allow the teenager to do what they need to do independently and provide them with as much preparation as possible on how to handle certain situations, and know that you will be there if something happens, and that your teenager will also know that there may be things that could happen in life, but they know they can always come to you to help and support. So I based this teen essence, based off of a book by Daniel Siegel. I actually have it right here. Let me show you. I love Daniel Siegel because he talks about the teen brain and how it works and the scientific base and how to apply it in real life. So here's the book. This one's a pretty good book. So based on everything I'm talking about is based off of this book. And this is helpful for parents to read, but also it's great for teens to read as well. They even have activities in there too. So what Daniel Siegel talks about is the essence of being a teenager, in which, of course, each letter represents something. ES is the emotional spark that teenagers may have, and where, like what I was saying before, there's going to be an overwhelming amount of emotions that's happening because the movement and maturity into their emotional brain from the back up to the front. And also there may be more social engagement, meaning that they want to connect with their peers and have new relationships, which is why even we hear like, why do my kiddos want to hang out with their friends all the time? It's because this is part of their development and being able to have this connection with other people around them. Also being a teenager, there's some novelty, meaning, there's a lot more drive for reward and wanting to try new things. And then also it comes with creative exploration too, in which they're able to explore and see the world in a different way, which is why we're seeing a lot of, let's say, child inventors almost. They kind of see what is going on in the world and try to create a solution for it. And so the ability to think outside the box is something that we should really nourish. So we'll kind of talk about the benefits and challenges of each parts of being the essence of being a teenager. Is that, with the emotional spark, there's a lot of energy and a lot of drive for life. And sometimes that could rule the day, which could lead into we may get moody or get really upset because we could feel really, really great, but then also we could feel really, really bad too. And also the benefits of social engagement is that they learn social skills and they build friendships for connection. Meaning, if we're thinking about this is our way of gaining support, and that means that we are building these friendships around us and allowing the teenagers to explore with the appropriate friendships, which can help them in learning social skills, which is actually going to be helpful in combating depression and anxiety as well. But the challenge of that is that, sometimes there's peer pressure. Sometimes because we want to fit in with these, let's say, peers, then sometimes there's a pressure to do things to stay within the group. So that's a risk too. And the benefits of novelty is that they're open to change, and this allows for teenagers to get ready to try uncomfortable things, but also can lead into risk-taking, because sometimes I feel like as adulthood happened, my risk-taking really decreased, and I feel like sometimes I wish I can kind of be a little bit more like a teenager and being more open to change and trying new things. And so that comes down to also creative exploration. They see the world a little differently, which allows for innovation, but sometimes that can lead into identity crisis because they're in this time, they're trying to figure out who they are as a person, like what their values are and what is it that they want to do later on in life too. So as we segue into, teens and adults, they are going to show depression just a little bit differently. So we're shifting towards a mental health part of it. So you guys understand a little bit more about the teen and the teen brain and why they may do the things that they do. Now we're going to talk about depression, like suicidal thoughts and things like that, and self-injury, like self-harm. So with teenagers, what it may show differently with teens versus adults in depression is that we may notice more irritability or angry mood whenever there's some feelings of depression. So sometimes we feel like that's just, let's say, teenagers just get angry. Well, usually if there's an increased amount of irritability or anger, there's usually some level of sadness in some way or some other issues. Or there's also unexplained physical ailments. So for example, they may not, this is especially with younger kiddos, they may not say, hey, I'm feeling sad. It may show in headaches or stomach aches, for example. And let's say always going to a nurse's office for headaches or stomach aches, something you should be aware of. If a kiddo is extremely sensitive to criticism, which is why sometimes we feel like we're walking on eggshells because we don't want to say something that could, make them feel like they're criticized in some way. So they may be a little bit more hyper aware. And they may withdraw from some people, but not everyone. So they may withdraw or isolate, let's say, in their room with the family, but still hang out with their friends. That does not mean that if they're not isolating or withdrawing from their friends, that they do not have these feelings of depression. So as we talk about depression and suicidal what the warning signs of suicide are, I want you to think about what is out of the ordinary for my teenager. So what is out of the ordinary for my kiddo, not teenagers in general? So that'll make more sense as we kind of talk together about the warning signs of suicide. So let's say if someone's struggling with depression, a kiddo may have issues at school, they may run away a lot, drug or alcohol use, have low self-esteem, use the internet as a way to kind of escape, self-harm, which we'll talk about that, violence, or even suicidal thoughts or behavior. So this is the important part, because there has also been an increase in, let's say, like suicidal thoughts, especially with the way of the world right now, right? So this is especially important. A lot of times we feel like suicide is something that just the professionals handle. However, us as professionals rely on parents, other students, and things like that to tell us if they're worried about someone. And so there are a lot of trainings for those who are not professionals about the warning signs of suicide. So you guys are aware on what these signs are and recognize, okay, I need to get this person some help and bring them to the professionals. So the first and obvious warning sign is verbal or written threats. That means if they verbally say, let's say, I don't want to be here anymore, life isn't worth living, I wish I were dead. So any in regards to not want to be here with the purpose of death. Or there may be written threats. There's not a lot of writing anymore, but there's more of, let's say, unwritten, nonverbal, such as social media posts or even texting talks about death or anything that is nonverbal. And the way you may notice is there's changes in sleeping or eating. So they may sleep more or sleep less, or eat more or eat less. So when I was saying earlier about this depends on what is out of the ordinary for your kiddo. So if you're noticing that they are sleeping a lot more when they usually kind of stay up or maybe wake up early to do things, that's something to note. Or if you know that your kiddo likes to eat but is starting to push their food away, that's something to note as well. Or maybe there's a drop in grades where they used to be A, B, or C students and now they're maybe failing. If they start giving away their possessions, things are very important to them. Or even sudden happiness. So we don't really put happiness and suicide together, but if they've been sad for a long period of time, now all of a sudden they're happy, this may be a sign that they are happy and relieved that they have a solution to the problem and they have a plan on what they're going to do to take their own life. So it's something to note as well. Or maybe they may start to use drugs and alcohol, or there's higher anxiety. So it's not the normal anxiety such as before taking a big test or the normal anxiety of presenting, right? But more of the anxiety to where there's panic attacks. It's hard for them to do things without high worry or avoidance of things. And also, if you know that someone has attempted suicide before and they're showing some of these signs, then those are some things we need to be aware of too. So as we look at all these signs, what we do is we take everything into account. We don't just choose one and say, oh my gosh, my kid is, let's say, suicidal, right? Except if someone's making those verbal or written threats, those are the things that we always take seriously. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're not noticing anything different with your kiddo, except maybe they are, let's say, not eating as much. So being able to kind of look at the whole picture is, does it look like they're not eating as much? Does it look like their grades are dropping, or all of a sudden their anxiety is high and they're giving their stuff away? So we kind of look at the whole picture. The reason why we have all these signs and to look at what is out and ordinary for the kiddo is at the Suicide and Crisis Center, we also do postvention, which means that we come to school after we lose a kid to suicide. And as I go through all these different schools and get to know the student that we lost, they don't all look the same. Meaning that we had one kiddo who was high achieving, they did really well in school, but had shared with other people that they've been sad, there's a lot of pressure, and they were showing some signs. And I also see on the other end when there was a person who was highly popular, everything seemed fine, looks like they were talking to everyone, but some people were not aware of some of his own emotional sadness that he may have shared with somebody else. And so we cannot tell just by looking from someone just in front of us that this person may have thoughts of suicide. The thing is that we have to kind of understand and know what is out of the ordinary for that person, and if you're worried about them, to ask that question. So we're going to talk about asking about suicide. So the first part is to ASK, which is ask about suicide. Being very direct, meaning, are you thinking about or planning to kill yourself? So what I tell everyone is that you know what the signs are, and now you are having this gut feeling that something is off. Usually what I say is just trust your gut feeling and just ask the question anyway of, are you thinking about or planning to kill yourself? Because the worst, you're going to get two answers, right? Either a yes or a no. And at least you're able to kind of ask and ensure that you are doing, I guess, making the extra precautions and taking it very seriously. The other part of the S part is, the first part is seek more information, meaning, okay, yes, you are saying that you have thoughts and want to kill yourself. What is the plan? What are you planning to do? When were you planning to do this? And how? Usually a lot of times when we are talking to them, whenever we hear someone say that they have suicidal thoughts, sometimes we may start to either over or underreact. I mean, it's natural because we feel, I mean, it's not a comfortable topic to talk about when it comes to suicide. And especially if it is your kiddo, someone that you love and care about, no one wants their kiddo to kind of feel like this. However, the way that we respond is going to determine if your kid's going to come to you and talk to you about certain things as well. So we want to be aware on how our own response is when it comes to, let's say, suicide or self-harm. So being able to be there to listen and really ask what is going on for them, and just be there to listen, and we'll talk about what that would look like. The other part is safety first. So ask the individual or person where they maybe go for help. So usually, if this is what we teach kiddos, is if you know someone that you're worried about, like a friend, and you ask them the question if they have suicidal thoughts, then figure out who is the safe adult that they like to go to, and then go with them to that adult. The other part of S is secure lethal means, meaning that if they share that they're going to use, let's say, a gun or medication, to make sure that whoever that person's, maybe adult if it's a child, or if it's an adult you're worried about, maybe their partners, sibling, somebody that can take away those lethal means so it's not there as a way for the person to use. And then the last part for K is know when and how to refer. So depending on if we're concerned about this person, they say, yes, I have these thoughts, I have a plan, and I'm going to do it now. Do not leave the person alone, and we need to call, let's say, like 911 to make sure we make that person safe. Now, if the person say, I have suicidal thoughts, but I have no plan, I'm not going to do it, that means that they are still struggling to where they have these suicidal thoughts. So being able to know where to refer, if that's with a counselor or a psychiatrist, for example. So usually all school districts have kind of a list of referrals. And so if you want to reach out to them, they could probably provide you a different list. And then maybe connect you with someone who'd be able to maybe get continuous care for your kiddo or for the adult, for example. And I feel like this is really important to talk about too, is because there has been a lot of, let's say, teens and self-harm. So this is a very important topic too. So the clinical term, we say self-injurious behavior, but it's the same thing as what we would, I guess, in general call like self-harm. Usually it happens a lot in the teen years, and there is maybe more 1 in 5 females versus 1 in 7 males, but it could happen either females or males too can engage in self-harm. And there are, we'll talk about the difference with someone can self-harm but not be suicidal. So that's what we call non-suicidal self-injury. Or there is or there is self-harm and also suicidal thoughts that come with it too. But there is this person from Cornell University, that Dr. Janice Whitlock, that does a lot of research when it comes to self-harm, and says, like, if someone engages in 20 or more self-harm behaviors, they're 3.4 times more likely to have attempted suicide. So self-harm can definitely be a potential warning or risk as well. So sometimes when we think of self-harm, we think it's just, let's say, cutting, right? But the main definition is any deliberate self-destruction of our body tissue that results in immediate damage. So that could be cutting, scratching, burning ourselves. The main part of the definition is intentionally and on purpose hurting themselves. Sometimes people have different reasons why they may self-harm, as a way to control emotions, to make them feel better, or maybe as a way to help distract from very overwhelming emotions. And so as we kind of talk about self-harm, is sometimes people have even said it has prevented them from actually attempting suicide. And so there is the non-suicidal self-injury, which is self-harm without suicidal thought. It's different from suicide because the intent of self-harm is to feel better, whereas the intent of suicide is to not be here at all. And then the method used may be different. I think as we kind of talk about the next slide, some of the important questions to ask is, what are some of the things that, let's say, the kiddo is using as a way to hurt themselves, is important in helping. And then also the frequency, meaning that with self-harm, they may do it more often. Sometimes it could go from daily to maybe once a week, or even escalate to like many times in a day. And also, as I was talking about earlier, and how self-harm can really, some people have even said it has helped them in not, I guess, having these thoughts of suicide or carrying out any kind of plan of suicide. And so we don't know unless we really ask that question, which is why I always say that we kind of lean towards asking anyways, like, have you had those thoughts of wanting to kill yourself? What can we do as, let's say, parents? So being able to know what the warning signs are there physical markings? Does it look like they're not dressed for the season, meaning they may be wearing a large sweater when it's like 100 degrees in this Texas weather? Another warning is if there's talks about other friends who self-harm, or maybe it looks like they're always kind of covering themselves up with like bandages, for example. And what are some risk factors? Like, what are some things that maybe we may notice could, let's say if a kiddo is internalize their problems and maybe blame themselves, have poor self-esteem, or it's hard time for them to know how to handle certain emotions, those could be risk factors. And so what we do, just like with suicide, is really asking them, have you, hurt yourself in some way? And being able to kind of talk about it and take it seriously. Being able to kind of have that open line of communication. Let's not assume that they're going to outgrow it, because if a child is, let's say, using self-harm as a way to deal with certain things, this is not something that's outgrown. This is something that really needs, professional help in some way. For the kid to talk to really talk about what it is that they're going through that results in their self-harm. And then validate their feelings. And also the important part is not pressuring them to talk when they don't want to, meaning that we are, coming in non-judgmentally and there to really listen, and making sure that, let's say, we don't force the kiddo to say, no, we have to talk about this right now, because that's going to result in shutdown. So I'll share a personal story. When me and my sister were younger, when we got in trouble, we knew we were in trouble because my dad would say, let's go to La Madeleine, which was like this French restaurant. And so we're like, what is happening? Why? That means we're about to get a lecture. So I think that kind of coming to a place where it's not so much like going across the dinner table and say, hey, we're going to talk about this right now, but being able to go into like a very, let's say, a casual place, like a restaurant, allows for kids to take out the pressure and feel comfortable in talking. Sometimes there's more talks than car drives for some reason, where they have nowhere to go. So they kind of have to talk to you a little bit. So this kind of taking those little moments, casual moments, to really kind of understand what, again, your child's world, what it is that they're going through. And then when it comes to self-harm and suicidal thoughts, you're doing your part in being able to know the warning signs, and then from there, seeking treatment and help with a counselor or a psychiatrist in some way. And again, the school counselors may be able to help in assisting, like maybe some referrals too. And so I'm going to share some secrets to connecting with the team. It's not really a secret. There are a lot of, let's say, things that I've utilize as a way to help in connecting with teenagers. And usually a lot of times teenagers, once they connect with you, they won't leave you alone. So they want to be able to kind of talk to somebody and feel like, you know, they have a lot to share. And so they want to be able to share it with somebody that they can trust. So the first part is being able to identify early, like let's say we're concerned about something that a teen is going through. Instead of ignoring it, we're going to identify early and figure out, okay, there's something going on. Let's kind of talk about it. And understanding the transition from the teen brain and how difficult it may be in their brains trying to develop, and how their emotions could be very overwhelming, and also how there is a difficulty in not knowing exactly how to express some of these emotions. So being patient. And then also transferring knowledge, meaning that, you know, as we moved into adulthood, we learned a lot of different things. And so being able to kind of not only transferring the knowledge, but role model on how we handle our emotions, such as when we get angry, how do we handle that? Whenever we get sad, how do we handle that? Because kids, teenagers, they're watching. And so usually they are wanting to see, how do I deal with this? And who do they look to is usually their adult role models. And also same thing with respect. Just like teenagers, no matter what their age is, we all as humans deserve some form of respect. If a teenager feels like they're respected, they're going to provide that same respect to you as well. And so that's why it's important to kind of build that rapport and build that trust with them when they know that there is trust and acceptance fully for who they are, and that it's non-judgmental, and this is a place where they could talk to you about certain things and not feel judged but fully accepted. Then you're going to kind of open up and allow that teen to really talk to you, and kind of, you know, create like a safe space, a place where, again, the teenager can feel like they could be who they want to be, and without anyone else's kind of voice in their head a little bit. So creating that safe space and being able to kind of provide the safe space as a way to where we're communicating. I really want to understand what it is that you're going through. And then the important part is seeking help, right? Being able to, as the adults, we have the ability to go and take their kiddos to continuously see a professional, for example, or being able to know and help, let's say a teen who's going through crisis, they're not able to really problem solve on their own because they're going through a crisis. So as the adults who is not going through a crisis, may be able to kind of figure out, what can we do to help my kiddo during this transition as a teenager. So I kind of want to talk about the do's and don'ts. I think that some of these do's and don'ts are can be pretty obvious, but I like to talk about them. So address the issue as soon as possible, kind of like what I talked about before, detecting things early. Use your concern in a constructive way. Obviously, you're concerned about your kiddo if they're having suicidal thoughts or self-harm. So instead of taking this moment to, let's say, react in a very, very highly concerned way, we kind of take this as, okay, my kid is coming to me and talking to me about this. Let me listen a little bit more so I could kind of be able to figure out how I can help. And so we are validating the feelings, not the behavior, meaning that we are listening and saying, like, and understanding that what it is that they're going through is very natural, and that we are not approving of what it is that they're doing, but more of how hard it may be for anybody to feel sad, anxious, or have suicidal thoughts. Again, if they don't want to talk, don't pressure your teenager to talk, but maybe kind of set an agreed time together in which, hey, it doesn't seem like you're ready to talk right now. Let's figure out a time when we can kind of get back together after we've, let's say, cooled off or how to put all of our thoughts together. And then also, again, to understand our child's world, ask helpful questions to kind of better understand what is going on for them. And one of the best ways to shut down any conversation is yelling, let's say making threats or harshly punishing. So it's helpful to kind of, again, come in the conversation in a non-judgmental way. And let's try to avoid power struggles, because sometimes that'll happen if it's a parent and teenager. So sometimes there's the power struggle of, I'm the adults, and sometimes you gotta listen to me or else type of situation. And so sometimes when we have this power struggle, what's gonna happen is we're not gonna be able to figure out what to do to help our kiddo. Now what we're focused on is who is in power or not right now. Again, don't assume that they'll outgrow it. If they're having suicidal thoughts or engaging like some kind of self-harm, this is something really serious that, again, we need to kind of address as soon as possible. Some unhelpful statements such as, I know how you feel, how can you be so crazy to do this yourself, or you're doing this to make me feel guilty. So those statements in some way takes away the attention from what is that the kid's going through into how we're feeling, because how you're feeling is very valid. Right now, what your kiddo needs is some form of support and being able to kind of be there for them. That means listening. So there are, in the part of the Chinese character and languages, that there are a whole bunch of words put together into making one character. And so I like to share this in the Chinese word for listening and how there's different components to it. The first part is ears. I mean, part of listening is that we are hearing what that person is saying. Eyes to see, meaning that we are putting our eyes towards that person, not getting distracted with TV or other things, but really sitting down and kind of looking them in the eyes and put all of our undivided attention and focus in what they're saying. And then mind to think, meaning we are not thinking to respond. We're just thinking about what is it that I can say that's appropriate or not in this situation. Because sometimes whenever we respond, let's say if a kiddo's coming to us and let's say they have suicidal thoughts, our emotional response would be, oh my gosh, what's happening? And it's hard for us to be very logical at that point. So being able to kind of use our mind and logic in order to kind of see the situation. And then heart to feel. We have to be kind of empathetic and remember the times and when you were a teenager and how things were very overwhelming, and how sometimes what we wanted as teenagers was also someone to listen to how we're feeling. And sometimes it could be hard to remember that, just because, you know, as adults, we're all very busy and you're trying to do 20 things at once. But these moments of listening to your teenager can be opportunities in creating connection with them and really understanding their world and figuring out what you can really do in guiding them down the road in the future. So these are all different references of where I got it from, this information. And I think, yes, right here is that book that I was telling you all about. And then here's also my contact information. You guys have any questions? There is, again, you guys have the counselors at the school who are able to be there and providing any type of resources that y'all may have. And so they're there to kind of help. So reach out to them, because sometimes we don't always know that they're there. I don't know how many times students say, like, I've never met my counselor or anything before. I'm just like, well, maybe pop in their door. But they have a lot of information and could be a very great resource and help, especially during everything that's going on. All right. We're there. Maybe we could kind of take this time to see if there were any questions. Any questions at all?
Dr. Miller or Ms. Chapman, do you want to go ahead and tell the parents again, because several joined us after Dr. Miller spoke earlier, what you do have available for their students if they're at the high school, please?
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Miller, and Mrs. Chapman's on here too, and I'll let her introduce herself. But we're the student support advocates, so we're on Wylie High School campus, and we're there to help students with personal, emotional things going on. You can find us in the counseling office, and you can email us at our first name dot last name at wileyisd.net. So it's april.miller and lori.chapman. And so I am seeing the students from alphabet A to L, and Mrs. Chapman seeing M through Z. So stop by anytime and let us know if you have concerns about a student or a friend. We're here to help. And I'll let Mrs. Chapman introduce herself too.
Hi, I'm Lori Chapman. I have the pleasure of working with Dr. Miller this year. I've been a counselor at Wylie High School for 5 years, and then I've been at Wylie High School for about 17 years. And so I have M through Z, and I welcome any questions, any parents to call, or any students who need help.
Can you tell them about your online room you have, especially for those remote students who might not be in your building right now?
Yeah, so we created a virtual counseling office to help meet the needs of all students, those that are remote and those that are on campus. And so we have all kinds of information there about mental health topics, including suicide and self-harm. And there's also a calming room. So there's a lot of activities there on the calming room to help you deal with emotions and to calm yourself. I'm gonna try to type in the address to the chat box so that everyone can know how to access our office, our virtual office.
Thank you. While you do that, Jennifer, someone in the chat said, is there a way you recommend asking questions that would be easier to receive about any of those warning signs? And also, do you have any experience what happens if or when you call 911 when you are concerned a teen is having a mental health crisis?
Okay, so great question. So I'm gonna answer the first part because I just saw it on the chat. Is there a way you could recommend asking questions to be easier to receive? Okay, so sometimes some of these warning signs are not always kind of verbally shared. It's about what it is that we're noticing, right? So if we're noticing something, then after that, then we go and ask like, hey, I'm noticing this and this happening. What's going on for you, right? Or come talk to me. I'm kind of concerned or worried about it, and then see from there. Because we don't want to come in with a list of questions like, how's your eating? How's your sleeping? How's all these things, right? That is something that they'll definitely get at their, if they do seek treatment, for example. So what I say is when you're noticing something is kind of off, right? That's why I said, you know, kind of trust your gut feeling. Then be able to kind of trust your gut feeling and really share with them like, hey, this is what I'm noticing, what's going on, right? And hopefully they'll be able to talk to someone. Or if you know that they do not feel comfortable, then being able to see if they do have, let's say, an adult that they can really feel comfortable with, or even maybe saying, do you want me to, let's say, figure out, let's say a counselor for you to kind of talk about consistently. I've had several experiences while working at the private practice in which a lot of times teenagers are the ones that usually ask their parents, can I see a counselor? And so sometimes when we are able to really recognize that someone's your kiddo is struggling and be able to say, hey, do you want to talk to somebody? And I can help you figure that out and let's find somebody. So the second part, do you have any experience? Call 911. So usually, I've worked at a behavioral health center at Arlington Memorial. And so what usually happens is usually they'll have an officer kind of, depending on what the situation may be, whenever you tell them, hey, this is obviously when we're calling an emergency, that means this kiddo or maybe this adult has something with them that they look like they're going to take their own life. That's an emergency situation. You let them know what the issue is, and then they will kind of, the important part is to stay with this person because, again, we do not know what this person may do. So stay with them until the authorities come, and then from there, they'll ask questions and see from there, do we need to take this person to a behavioral health hospital? So that may be a possibility. Or there's also the Adapt Mobile Crisis Unit. So maybe I can add that into the chat, where they are a 24 hours kind of service in which you call, and they are specifically coming to like mental health and crisis, and they'll ask you a series of questions, and from there they'll determine if they need to come to your home and do a further assessment, and from there tell you what is their recommendation in, do we need to get somebody to come get this person, take them to behavioral health hospital, or is this a situation in which they would recommend that they need to kind of continue to seek treatment through a counselor, for example. Let me try to find the number for the Adapt Mobile Crisis, and I'm gonna put it in the chat. But I've had a lot of individuals use this, and it's really helpful because sometimes we don't know the seriousness of the situation, and it's like it's happening at 2 a.m. and we're kind of concerned that this could be a good resource to have.
Jennifer, I have the LifePath mobile crisis unit that serves Collin County, and I'll put the phone number, there's a 1-800 number that I'll put there that they can access.
Great, great. Okay, so I'm putting this one too. Do you guys have any other?
Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask the question where everyone can hear, or you can post in the chat also.
Whoever Rosa is, I may have accidentally just sent you 2 things. So I just sent it to everybody, the little Adapt Mobile Crisis Unit number. So you could always use that, in LifePath would be a good one too. Any other questions? Or unless y'all feel comfortable putting in the chat, we can always do that too.
Dr. Miller or Ms. Chapman, do you have anything else to add? Ms. Chapman, you are still muted.
I'm not really good with this Zoom stuff. Sorry about that. It was a great presentation. I really appreciate you doing that. And yeah, it was terrific. And thank you, Nicole, for this as well.
We're glad to do it. Yes, thank you, Jennifer, so much for coming out and trying Zoom with us, because we didn't know quite what to expect tonight. But we got a good round of parents, and we recorded it for any parents who couldn't be here with us tonight. So thank you for that. And parents, just know that you can contact Jennifer's program or the program at the high school if you need anything, or even if your kids are needing to talk to someone or find out more information about it. One last little bit from your PTSA. We are trying to work with the council to come up with some different ways to outreach to parents and students during COVID. And because we can't meet in the facilities, we're trying to do it through Zoom. So if you have different ideas that you have, please reach out to Wylie PTSA if there are topics like this that are really important to you and you would like us to explore trying to do a program for. And Jennifer, just everybody is saying thank you so much for the wonderful program. We really do appreciate everything you did for us tonight.
Yeah, of course. And it seemed like there was a last question. Is there stigma at Wylie High School for students seeking counseling at school?
Well, I might be able to answer that a little bit. I hope that there's not, but I think that there might always be a little bit because I don't think teenagers quite know what to expect. And so I think that's a barrier we're always going to have to deal with. And Mrs. Chapman and I are working the best we can to make it seem very inviting. And we hope that students will hear that it's not a threatening place and that it's a safe place. And we're a fairly new program, so there may be students that, I think there will always be students that will be a little bit leery of going to a counselor and talking about their problems. It's a really brave step to talk to someone about it. And so we just hope that as we do the best we can with each and every student, that they learn that we're there to help. So I don't know for sure, but I expect that there always is.
Dr. Miller, what if there?
I looked at that question. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ms. Chapman.
I looked at that question, and my first thought, and I kind of answered really different than Dr. Miller, but I looked at it differently. We in the where we are officed, there's also all the academic counselors. And so because we're all in there together and there's kids in and out, as far as like, is someone going to see me in the counselor's office and that kind of thing, that I don't think is a concern because kids are in and out for all kinds of different reasons. So that's kind of how I was looking at that question, and I think that I totally understand what Dr. Miller was saying, and I agree with that. But I also think that we do provide a certain level of comfort just because it's pretty anonymous in there.
My question for you was, if there's students, because I know that not everyone on here necessarily has a high schooler. If they're in the intermediate or junior high, is there someone specific they should go to in their schools?
Yeah, so there's school counselors on every campus that are trained to handle suicide threats. So any campus, elementary through high school, has counselors. The high school campuses have student support advocates, but the other schools, their counselors are trained and should be able to help with those issues as well.
Any other questions? I'm not seeing anything else pop up in the chat, but lots of thank yous.
We like those. We like those, right? Well, I appreciate y'all. And, you know, if there are other things that you guys would like to, let's say, for us to present on, we could always be there too, especially for the students as well, because obviously this is very important information for even peers too. Okay. Oh, that's a good question. So they're asking or wondering, what do y'all, I guess, the school do whenever there's a kiddo who expresses suicidal thoughts? I know each school has different policies that they may have.
Yeah, so if we, hopefully Mrs. Chapman and I or another counselor would be notified, and then we have a risk assessment that we complete with the student to gauge what kind of thoughts they're having, how serious those thoughts are. And then we work from there to provide the necessary supports that the student might need. So that would entail a call to the parent to chat with them about what might be necessary, whether, depending on the level of risk, do they need to hook up with a counselor? Do we need to consider inpatient treatment? Do we need to consider another kind of program? Should parents increase the level of supervision or remove access to means at home? So we have all those kind of conversations after we've met with the student, and we really take some time to get to know them and complete that assessment. So that's kind of, am I missing anything?
I think there were also, let's see. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, they also asked if a student reports a friend who may have expressed it. Is anything different if it's that, if a student is reporting it, not a parent?
Yeah, we will handle it the same way. And usually I try to keep who makes the report anonymous to the student. So I usually just say we get information from a variety of sources and someone's very concerned about you. And usually that's enough, and I don't have to share very many other details. So if a student knows that they're concerned about a friend, I know it's really hard to break the trust that your friend has in you to snitch or go to somebody that's an adult, but we don't disclose your name, and we would try to keep your name anonymous and do what we can to help keep your friend safe and alive.
I think students are a very good source of information, and they can, because they are talking to each other and they kind of, you know, they know what's going on with their friends. So we really value kids letting us know those things, because they're, you know, we can't see everything, and so we need kind of all the help we can get in that area, and they do a good job of letting us know those things.
And I've also had a situation where a student has asked me, what if they know another student at another school, maybe not the same district? So what I've told them is that if you know where that person goes to school, being able to tell your school counselor, and then they can reach out to your friend's school counselor, for example. So there's a way to do it. And they could be a great resource, and you could really help not only people in your school, but also in other friends that you may have around you too.
Anything else from anyone? More questions? Does having a family history of suicide increase our children's risk?
There is a genetic component when it comes to mental health, like depression, anxiety, and things like that, along with, let's say, a family of history of suicide. So the thing about risk is that it's a risk. So that means that it's not a guarantee. It just means that now we're aware that, let's say kind of like heart disease or diabetes, right? So when we know that there's a risk in the family because it's genetic, then we take the precautions to kind of be aware of it. So if you know that there is a family history of, let's say, depression, anxiety, or suicidal thoughts, and now maybe you're noticing signs or concerns by your kiddo, this could be an indicator like, okay, maybe I should seek help in some way, because this can be very much a genetic component. So knowing that information actually is very helpful and being able to be prepared. But yes, it can increase a risk. It's not guaranteed, but a possibility.
Really good questions.
Yeah, that is a good question.
I was just checking the chat one more time to see if we had missed anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any others. So Jennifer, we're going to let you go ahead and close us out. Thank you again to everyone who participated, and Jennifer and Dr. Miller and Ms. Chapman. We so appreciate you taking great care of our kiddos and all that you're doing to support us as parents as we're going through this with them. So thank you so very much. We really appreciate you.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.